Hi friends. This is our lighting instruments slide deck, and it is longer than some of the other ones that we've done. So I will have a couple of spots where you might want to take a break and stretch in between sections. This will be found in Illustrated Theater Production Guide in chapter 21. It's not quite laid out the same way that I'm teaching it though, but you can find some of this basic information in that document. And then you should also have a handout in your packet that is like a printout with the pictures of the lighting instruments on it. And that will give you a place to fill in the names of the parts of a light, which will be on your quiz. I was like looking for mine. It's not handy, but you should have one. And I will also attach it to this lecture object in Blackboard so you can have it if you want it. But yeah, let's go. Here we go. All right, so we're going to start with soft-edged beamed fixtures. So these are fixtures that are not as precise in where they shine the light. These are some of our original or older historically significant lighting instruments, and we still do use a lot of them today. So they're not obsolete, but we just use different versions now. I am going to mostly be talking through conventional fixtures, but do keep in the back of your mind, right, that any of these conventional fixtures at this point, most of them have a LED-based counterpart. So in those LED situations, we're looking at a slightly different context in terms of the physics inside of the fixture. So we will be talking about the physics of how each of these light instruments produces a beam, and that will be part of like our understanding of how those fixtures work. So we're going to start with the Fresnel, and that is your basic soft focus light. It's often used for washes, which is an even field of light that covers the whole stage. And you can change the size of the beam of light. You can either spot it down to make it smaller, or you can flood it out and make it larger. So they are named after this guy, this French guy, Fresnel. And in the 20s, they were adapted for the theater. He actually created this type of lens for lighthouses because they needed to focus light over long distances, but they needed to do it without the mass of a giant lens. And so he created this innovation where he took the shape of the lens, so the curvature of the lens, and then removed a lot of the material in order to still have the same physics properties, the same ability to shape the direction of the beams of light without having the weight and mass of the original lens. So here's what that would look like, right? So if we have a regular lens, we would take out all of this mass, right, in order to keep the same curvature, but not have all of this extra glass. And that makes it lighter. It also prevents it from absorbing as much heat. So it's a much more efficient way to get that same dynamics of the curve of the lens cut back down into a Fresnel. So that is the lens in that fixture. A Fresnel uses a spherical reflector, which means it's a half circle. So you have the light source, in this case it would be the lamp at the center of the reflector, and it will bounce off of the reflector and then come back through the focus and go out to the lens. So here's what that looks like in the context of a Fresnel, okay? So you have a lamp, the beams of light bounce off of the spherical reflector through the lens, back through the filament of the lamp, and then they come out via the Fresnel lens, okay? And the way that this beam spread is determined or changed is the distance between this lamp reflector setup and the lens. So as you pull the lens further away or move it closer in, you change the diameter of the pool of light that it produces. Here is the parts of the Fresnel. Okay, so find the cheat sheet, find the diagram amongst your papers, and write these in. And I'll go over them quickly for us right now. So we have a C-clamp. This is on any fixture that's hanging on a pipe. It's not unique to a Fresnel. So your C-clamp has 3 bolts that are significant. It has a clamp bolt or a pipe bolt that connect the clamp to the pipe. It has a set screw, or a pan adjustment screw, or in some cases, what is called a fucket nut, because it will break off. So the set screw is locking the left to right turning of this post. And then this post connects to the yoke of the light with what's called a yoke bolt. So the yoke of a light is a U-shaped metal frame that holds the fixture. So if we go back a couple slides to the picture of the Fresnel light, this is the yoke, okay? It holds the fixture in place and allows you to tip it up and down. And the yoke bolt is what connects the yoke to the C-clamp. Okay, great. So now let's see what else. We have a lamp. We don't call them light bulbs, we call them lamps. We have a spherical reflector. We have a stage pane connector, which we'll talk about more next week. There's a release knob right here that allows you to open up the front face of the fixture to access the lamp or make adjustments inside of the fixture. There's a carriage or housing that holds the lamp unit, and it also has the reflector rides along with it. And then a focus knob, which lets you slide that whole carriage forwards and backwards inside of the fixture. Last thing I think is the gel frame slot. So gel is color, right? Color media that you put in front of the light to change the color, plastic. And so it lives in a frame, and then that goes into a slot on the front nose of the fixture. So you can hit pause and write in all of these names of things on your diagram. And then we will talk about the size of the fixture, right? So it can spot or flood based on how far away the carriage is from the front of the fixture, right? So when it's far away from the front of the fixture, it's considered a spot, right? And that's actually a narrow beam of light. And so that's a longer focal length, a narrower beam of light. Whereas when you move it really close to the front, close to the lens, then you'll have a flood. So it's a shorter focal length and a flooded out light beam. Great. Okay, so that's the Fresnel. Then we have the Parkhand. So a Parkhand, PAR, stands for Parabolic Aluminized Reflector, okay? These are basically a metal can with a yoke, a way to hold this lamp, and a way to put a gel in front of it, right? A gel frame holder. And it is super cheap. The entire lamp contains the reflector, it contains the lens, and the lamp itself. And so the most expensive part is that lamp, and the rest of it is just a really cheap way to plug that lamp in. They are soft edged, so they're not like a precise edge. They're super bright, they're super cheap, and they have a variety of beam angles available. So you can choose a narrow or a very narrow spot, or a medium flood or a wide flood. And the way that you switch between those is by taking the entire lamp out and putting another one in. So that is a Parkhand. It has as you would expect from parabolic aluminized reflector, a parabola-shaped lens. Okay, it's a parabola-shaped reflector. It's a parabolic reflector. So when you place a point of light or a lamp at the center, at the focus of that parabola, the beams of light will bounce off of the reflector and all of them will go straight forward, okay? So when we had the spherical reflector, right, the light went out and then back through where it came from. And in this case, the light will go out and it will all go straight forward towards the front of the fixture. So that is the reflector that's built inside the lamp. This is what those lamps look like. They're a sealed beam situation, so that reflector is built in, the lens is built in, and then the lamp sits inside of it. And you'll also find these for like flood lamps outside your house. You'll also find these for like car headlights or this like epic motorcycle headlight display. These are all par fixtures, okay? Inside of the par, right? So when you open up the back of the fixture of the Parkhand, there is a retaining ring that sits right here, and that's what holds the lamp in the housing. And then there is a plug that you plug onto the back of the lamp. So if we were looking a minute ago, the back of this lamp has a plug on it, and then you attach that in with this lamp housing. And then it has a regular stage pen connector coming off on the other side. So our parts of a par, here we go, fill them in on your paper. We have a parabolic reflector that's inside the lamp. We have the lamp itself, which I'm pointing to kind of the middle of the mass of the lamp to identify the part that has the lamp in it. There's this retaining ring, right, that's a pinch ring, so you squeeze it in order to pull it out or put it back in. And that holds or locks the lamp in place inside of the fixture. And then there's a diffused glass lens on the front. Other than that, it's all the same stuff, right? So it has a lamp base or a housing, has a gel frame holder, a color frame holder on the front. And then it does also still have a yoke and tilt adjustment knobs that allow you to point it up and down, and a C-clamp that's like up above this image. But these are the things specific to a Parkhand. So once we did that, we have now what's called a source 4 par. And this is using the same ideas as the par fixture, and it has the same qualities of light as the par fixture. So it's still very fuzzy. One of the differences between like a Fresnel and a par is a par actually creates an oval shaped beam, and these source 4 pars do as well. But in this case, instead of a whole sealed beam lamp, we are able to use technology that was invented with the Source 4 brand and have lamps that can swap between these fixtures and other theatrical spotlights, so they can use different, so they can use the same lamp among different instruments, which is really convenient in your inventory. And then instead of having to take out the whole lens lamp component, in this case, you actually just swap out the lenses. So this one has similar parts, right? I don't know if you have a diagram of this. It's less important to me that you know the parts of the Source 4 par than the fact that it exists. So it also has a lamp housing, a yoke, right? It has a lens rotating ring, right? So when we were back in the par, I said something about how it's an oval-shaped beam, and the way that you determine the direction of the oval, it's called running the bottle, or the lighting designer will just ask you to rotate the beam. You actually just reach your hand through this hole in the back and you twist the whole lamp. You grab the housing with your gloves because it's super hot, and you twist the whole lamp to rotate that oval shape. On a Source 4 par, there's a little ring right here in this slot that allows you to rotate the lens in order to align the direction of the oval as indicated by your designer. So that has a lens, it has a color frame, great, wonderful. And then these are what those interchangeable lenses look like, from the very narrow spot all the way up to the wide flood. And so that allows you to get different sizes in your beams of light. So then Source 4 was like, this is not enough. We will now make an even weirder hybrid, which is a Source 4 Parnell. So it again uses the same lamp, right? But instead of interchangeable lenses, it actually has two lenses that rotate. And so you can rotate using a knob on the bottom of the fixture. You can rotate the lens in order to spot or flood it, and that's why it's called a Parnell, inspired by the Fresnel fixture, which allows you to spot to flood, change the beam diameter. So that's a Parnell. Then we got a Cyclite. This is one of our last soft-edged beams. So a Cyclite is used to light a backdrop, right? Or any drop, really, could be lit with a Cyclite. It's specially designed to throw light evenly down from like the top of the from the top of a cyc, right? Relatively close to a cyc. It's designed to throw light evenly down in a beam. We use then, in this case, we use multiple cells in different colors to do color mixing. And that's something we can look at a little bit more in I have a couple like online color mixing model tools that we can play with, and lighting model tools that we can play with. So a cyc light allows you to mix together in a series, right, the color across the cyc in order to evenly light it and wash it and give you different color options for your backdrop. Here is the way that would actually break down, right? So we used to do red, green, and blue. Those are the primary colors of light. We can watch a video about how color works in a little while. And so cyc lights have either 3 or 4 of those different colors. Sometimes you'll get an amber swatch or whatever. And then you mix them together to produce any color in the rainbow. And now, typically, rather than doing something like this deal, right, as we move into the future, where we actually do live right now, we have moved away from this old color mixing model and into using LED strip lights as a replacement that allow you that same color mixing without having to use different gels. And so you're able to get a wider range, more dynamic color changing, all of that kind of stuff using these newer LED fixtures and their color mixing properties. So in that case, instead of mixing giant incandescent swatches, we are mixing tiny LEDs across the entire strip in order to get that even wash of color on our cyc. All right, let's take a quick break. Okay, I got some water. Now I'm back. All right, let's see. So next we want to talk about spotlights, right? And these are the workhorse of our lighting field. The ERS is the ellipsoidal reflector spotlight, okay? And let's look at them. Let's look at some of their qualities. So an ERS, or an ellipsoidal reflector spotlight, is a sharp-edged beam, right? So you don't, instead of the light kind of fading out around the edges, you have actually a sharp beam. Because it has that, you can shape it and control it more. It has specific elements here in the center of the fixture that we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. And you can do stuff like put patterns in it. So you can throw Gobos, which are pattern templates, into these fixtures and project that pattern in the beam. So your Source 4 brand, it's actually a brand name. This is what you will most often hear, right? You're most often going to hear about Source 4 ellipsoidals, especially as we move forward. There are definitely older ones, older fixtures that you'll still run into, but the Source 4 brand has become an industry standard. And the reasons are, it is energy efficient, it has interchangeable barrels, so the lens portion can be swapped between fixtures, which is really convenient. It allows you to change beam angles, so that's again the diameter of the pool of light that comes from it. And it can accommodate most accessories. So those are reasons why a Source 4 brand fixture has become an industry standard in this type of light. But the older version that you'll still run into a lot, you'll run into them in like 99-seat theaters and other older venues all the time, are Altman ERSs. So it's an older fixture. It doesn't have as even of a field. They are way less convenient to focus, and they come in different sizes for those different beam diameters, okay? So you have a 6x9 or a 6x12 or a 6x16. That refers to the focal length, and it's inversely correlated with the beam angle, right? So the larger that second number, the narrower the beam that will come out of the fixture. But instead of being able to just swap that lens thing from fixture to fixture, you actually have entirely different lighting fixtures for each of those beam diameters. And so that's part of why they're less convenient nowadays. There are a few other brands that you'll run into, but these are like the two that were most common. So every lighting instrument, and you've seen this in the ones that we talked about with the softer edges as well, will tend to have a reflector of some kind, a lamp in the middle, and then a lens on the front. And that gives you control of the light that's coming out of the lamp. Okay. So in the case of the ERS, we are looking at an ellipsoidal reflector. So you have a lamp placed at the focus of an ellipse, which is an oval, right? And an oval has two foci. It has a focus at the one end and a focus at the other end, right? So if this were to continue, it would have another round bit, and that would be centered around this focus, okay? So your lighting rays converge and diverge, right? And so what will happen is, as light is emitted from a lamp placed at focus 1, it'll bounce off that reflector, and instead of going back through or going straight forward like those ones that we've looked at before, it'll actually converge at focus 2. And that is super convenient for us, and that is why we use it as the reflector for this type of fixture, because gathering all of that light together again at focus 2 gives us a lot more control of it, okay? If you have a pattern, it'll drop in about here, and as you see in the notes, it will come out upside down and backwards, but that's something that we solve later. Okay, so I'm going to skip this video, but this is how you draw an ellipse, and as you draw it, the string is the beam of light. We're going to skip ahead. So the lenses used in these fixtures are plano-convex lenses, right? So they tend to take beams of light and converge them down, right? Or if the light is coming from this side, it'll open them up to that angle, okay? So these are PC, plano-convex lenses. Here's what it looks like inside of that lighting fixture, okay? So the red lines are the light itself. You have the primary focal point, that's the source of the light, that's where your lamp is. Then you have all of the things that control the shaping of that light, which includes a slot for your gobo. It includes what are called shutters, which are handles that let you chop off parts of that light, so you're able to shape that circle into a square or other rectangular shape. And then it has a pair of lenses that give you specific control of both the sharpness of the edge and also the focal length in general, right? So parts of a light inside, here we go. All right, so these are the interior parts of the ERS. Okay, some of these are exterior, like a stage plug, but hey, there you go. So we do have a lamp base or a housing. We have a lamp here at focal point 1. We have the ellipsoidal reflector here surrounding that lamp. We have the gate, which is focal point 2. So that's where all of that beam of light converges again at the gate. We have these handles on the shutters. You would have a gobo slot here as well, if you have a gobo. And then here are your two plano-convex lenses. They are seated in this lens train. So that allows this whole tube to slide backwards and forwards. And on the very front of the lens train, although it is not labeled in this case, you do have a gel frame holder. So you do have a slot to drop your gel in there on the front. So go ahead and label these interior parts, and then we'll look at exterior parts. All right, exterior parts. So a lot of this is very similar. So we called it a lens train, right, on that last one. This is the inside of an Altman. Okay, we called it a lens train. Here on a source 4, it's called a barrel. Those are kind of interchangeable, but the reason we call it a barrel on a source 4 in particular is that we can swap barrels. So we can unscrew this nut down here at the bottom, pull the whole barrel out, and swap it with another light to get a different beam angle. So it does still have a lens. It has a color frame, a gel frame holder here on the front. It has this little spring-loaded catch on a source 4 that you slide to the side in order to pop open and put that gel in. It has shutters right here. It also has a slot for a gobo or an iris unit right in front of the shutters. There's your yoke, your C-clamp, the base or the lamp housing. So the base is the part of the fixture you can actually take off to access the lamp. The power cable is also known as a pigtail, and then once again, a stage pin plug. There are other kinds of plugs. We'll look at them very briefly. ERS sizing. So these are the older fixtures. This is basic photometrics. Wider beam angles have smaller second numbers, right? And this is sort of how that beam spreads out over distance, okay? So how far away would it be, and then what would the diameter be of that beam? So if you want to throw a long way, you use a longer focal length and it creates a narrower beam that spreads out more slowly. That's the basic idea. In the case of source 4s, we do swap the whole barrel, the whole lens train or the whole barrel in order to get those different beam sizes, okay? So this is sort of the basic idea, right? We have a throw distance from the fixture to the head of a person. These are the different names of those diameters, right? As you think about that pool of light, the designer standing at the focus point, right, on the stage. The hot spot of the beam is the very center of the beam, and then you have the field and beam angles as it spreads out. And that's something that we'll look at as well. All right, one more quick break, and then we'll look at accessories. Okay, so these are your basic lighting accessories that would go with those fixtures. Let's get to it. So gel is the plastic, right? And it's used to change the color of the light. It's currently made out of like an acrylic material. It is called gel because it was originally made out of gelatin, and there's a whole history of gel story I could tell you, but we're going to skip that for now. So these are different colors of plastic. They are indexed by and numbered by manufacturer. So you'll start to hear people being like, oh, I like Roscoe 08, or I like Roscoe, 60. Those are colors in a swatch book that have specific numbers assigned to them. And we'll look at that when we get into the programming project, because you'll be able to actually replicate those real gel colors using the visual models that we're going to play with. A gel frame holds the gel, right? So you take a piece of flimsy plastic, you put it into this frame in order to more easily manage it as you swap it in and out of the front of the fixtures. A color scroller is placed in front of an older fixture like this par, right? You could also put it on the front of a source 4 par or another like a Fresnel, depending on the stuff you have in inventory. And you put it in the gel frame holder of whatever instrument you have. Typically we'll do it not on typically you won't do it as often on an ellipsoidal, more often on a soft edged beam. And it basically gives you the opportunity to change the color during the show on an older instrument that doesn't have a color changing property. So what is happening inside of this color scroller is there's a wheel, and there are two little rollers on either side. And there's this whole string of squares of color taped together, basically, right? So it scrolls through color to color to color in order to get to the color that you want it to be, right? And so by sliding that gel, spooling that gel to the one side or the other side, you're able to switch between colors during the show. So that is an accessory you can add on to the front of one of your soft edge beams. Or you can just get an LED fixture and it's not a thing that you have to worry about. Gobos. So these are pattern templates, right? We call them gobos. And they're used in ellipsoidal instruments or ellipsoidal reflector spotlights. They project the pattern in light. And so they can be made of several different materials. They all have to be able to withstand high heat. So you have either this, which is a glass gobo, right? So this is actually glass, dichroic glass with different fragments of color built into it. So that would just like make this kind of beautiful stained glassy kind of texture. You can also create colored glass, photorealistic images printed on glass, and that will give you an exact replication of that. You can get steel gobos cut into basically any pattern that you want. And so you also, or you can buy them from a catalog, although at this point, typically any gobo that you purchase will just be cut to order. So the catalog is a set of patterns though, that are standard. We have a big file folder, like a big binder full of gobos that you can flip through to go shopping for your shows. And then there are gobo holders or template holders that hold these various gobos, right? The ones that are glass are a little thicker, and so you actually have template holders with a spacer in them that allow you to accommodate that thicker glass gobo. Or you can just put in a regular steel gobo and a flat gobo holder, or these round ones for specific fixtures. So gobos go in a gobo holder, and then we have that handle to put it into the lamp and pull it out again. A drop-in iris is super useful. So an iris is like in your eyeball, right? It's a aperture that opens and closes, or in a camera. You'll often see this iris idea in a camera. These ones you're able to drop into, again, your ellipsoidal instruments. We usually put them in a source 4, although there are irises for other fixtures. They're very convenient for a source 4 because you literally just drop it in, and then you have a handle that gives you infinite variation on diameter. And so it allows you to do what's called like a pin spot, right? Where you bring it in really tight on a light really tight on one object. Or it allows you to, create a smaller circle of light than the beam that you have allows. So we have top hats. They are called top hats because they look like top hats. And you drop them into the gel frame holder with the gel. They control flare. So that will help kind of keep the little extra bits of light around the edges controlled, and it'll keep the light out of the eyes of your audience. It'll also, if you have a light that's like sitting right next to a curtain, like putting that top hat on it is just going to control that flare enough that you don't see little stray pieces of light hitting your curtain. You just see light landing on the stage. So that's really useful. Top hats, yes. There are also half hats, which are a top hat, but only half. So that's another thing that you can find. There are color extenders. So one of the problems with the plastic gel is that as it heats up, it will burn out, and it basically degrades the pigment. So you lose the color over time. And a color extender helps you out with that problem by just pulling the gel that much farther away from the lamp, from the heat source, and that'll make it last a little longer, which is great. We have a barn door. So this goes in the gel frame holder, and it's to help you out with your soft edge lights, your Fresnels, your Pars, right? And that's because you don't currently, like with the basic fixture, have any way of controlling the edges of those beams. So a barn door comes in and acts kind of like a shutter. And it lets you kind of like take the edge off of the light over here, take the edge off of the light over there, right? And control the edges of the beam in addition to pointing the center where you want it to go. So that's a barn door, and it looks like a barn door, and that's why we call it that. And it also just goes into your gel frame holder, and it has a slot in it typically to accept gel as well. So you can still gel a light that has a barn door. You just have to like fit it all together correctly. All right, that's lights. We did it. Ta-da. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and we'll talk more about this. We'll have John show us some of his fixtures, and that will be really helpful to see how they work. We'll talk with him about focusing lights and how we point them where they go and what kinds of fixtures we have that are cooler than these. So these are all conventional fixtures, but even at Cal Poly, we have some intelligent lights, which have other properties, like they can either have little motors in them that point them wherever you want, right? Like at a rock concert, or you can change the color. If it's an LED fixture, it has like a color changing functionality, and all of those things are really useful and really where the industry is moving in a lot of ways. But we're going to start with the basics, and with the stuff that you'll still find around pretty much everywhere. All right. Thanks, friends. I'll see you guys next week.